Hi, guys. Welcome back, and hope that the didactic we just went through was helpful for you. And we have got a special treat on steroids here. We've got a good friend and somebody that you have been reading and studying for a long, long time, Dr. Gary Chapman, who's a psychologist, pastor, author, writer, and sort of like one of the primary sort of in our world of Christian counseling, one of the guys that drove so much of the healthy stuff that was written out that has changed the world. His book, he's written many, many books. His book, The Five Love Languages, has sold over 11 million copies all over the world, many, many different languages. He's going to talk about something else today because he's got another thing on his heart. But I'd like to welcome Gary Chapman. Gary, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, John. It's great to be with you and all the students.
Well, they're excited about you being here and what you bring to the table, and kind of you're sort of a mentor for them. And guys, y'all don't know this, but Gary and I have some things that are similar. He's been living and working and ministering in Wake Forest, North Carolina for 45 years, and I'm from North Carolina. And we found out some similarities. I wonder why the guy talked right. Guys, his accent's right. I don't understand it, but we both love that area, and we're going to get together and have some real good pork barbecue with a little bit of vinegar and salt and pepper one day.
Absolutely.
Good. Gary, just tell us what the topic is going to be. I know it's about a book you've written, and it has to do with apologies, and a very, very important topic for people doing counseling. Just take it away.
Yeah, I want to talk about dealing effectively with your failures. I believe this is one of the key issues. If we're going to have long-lasting, healthy relationships, we have to deal with our failures. And the reason I say that is because none of us are perfect. You know, one man did raise his hand when the pastor said, "Does anyone know of a perfect husband?" He shot his hand right up. He said, "My wife's first husband."
Because that's all he heard about was the first guy, right?
So my observation is, if there are any perfect husbands, they are deceased. And most of them got perfect after they died. So the reality is, there are no perfect husbands, no perfect wives, no perfect parents, no perfect children. You don't have to be perfect to have good relationships, but you do have to deal effectively with your failures. And so I want to talk about apologizing and forgiving, because those are the two elements in dealing with failures. Several years ago, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago now, a counselor here in our town came to me, and she said, "Gary, I've been using the five love languages for years in my counseling, and it's helped so many people. But I believe," she said, "that people have also an apology language, different apology languages." I said, "What do you mean by that?" She said, "Well, I think that what one person considers to be an apology is not what another person considers to be an apology." And as soon as she said it, I resonated, because for years they've been in my office arguing over whether or not one of them apologized. So the wife would say, "I would forgive him if he would just apologize." And he would say, "I did apologize." And she would say, "You didn't apologize." And he would say, "I told you I was sorry." And she would say, "That's not an apology." So they're arguing over whether or not he apologized. And so we talked a bit and agreed that we would do some research and try to find out if this is really true. Do people have different apology languages? That is, different ways that they consider to be a sincere apology. So we asked thousands of people 2 questions. Number 1, when you apologize, what do you typically say or do? Question number 2, when someone apologizes to you, what do you want to hear them say or do? And their answers fell into 5 categories. I promise you, we were not looking for 5.
I was going to say, if you tell me that wasn't a setup, I'll believe it, Gary.
And so we call them the 5 languages of apology. The title of the book is "When Sorry Isn't Enough," because we wrote a book after we did the research. And so I'm just going to share those with you, because I do think that people often miss each other in their efforts to apologize. Because when someone has hurt us or wronged us, and they are apologizing, what we're asking in the back of our mind is, are they sincere?
Yeah.
Because if we judge them to be sincere, we can forgive them.
Or if it's just words, it's different, right?
Yeah. If they think it's just words, or you're trying to whitewash it, you're just trying to get it behind you, it's much more difficult to forgive them. So let me just run through these with you. and you can flesh them out in the book if you like. But number one, and there's no particular order to these, but number one is expressing regret, often with the words, I'm sorry. But don't ever use the words, I'm sorry, alone. Tell them what you're sorry for. I'm sorry that I lost my temper and yelled at you. I'm sorry that I came home late and we missed the program. I know you wanted to go. If you simply say, I'm sorry, they may well be thinking, you certainly are. You think you're apologizing, they think you're giving a character report.
Yeah.
So tell them what you're sorry for and don't ever add the word but. I'm sorry.
That's one of my big ones. The word but, I hate the but.
So you have to learn to erase the but. When you hear yourself say but, just stop and say, excuse me, erase the but, and you'll break that habit. So that's one. And in this one, you're trying to express to them that you really feel badly about what you have done. You know, it's the prodigal son who's saying to his father, I don't deserve to be your son. I really messed up. Yeah. He's expressing regret. And so the second one is accepting responsibility. I was wrong. Should not have done that. No excuse for that. I accept responsibility. I was wrong. And for some people, this is what they're waiting to hear. And if you don't accept the responsibility of what you did is wrong, in their mind, you're not sincere. And this is difficult for some people because some people grew up in a home where they never were told anything they did right, but every day they were told what they did wrong. And now they get to be adults, and there's something inside that says, I'll never be wrong again. Yeah. I'm an adult now. Fact is, all of us are wrong from time to time. Yeah. So we have to learn how to say, I was wrong. Incidentally,
without falling into some kind of self-condemnation, judging in their head.
Absolutely. Incidentally, this is the first step in teaching a child to apologize, helping them accept responsibility for their behavior. A 4-year-old breaks a cookie and says, it broke. It broke. And the parent says, honey, let's say that a different way. I broke the cookie. Not wrong to break a cookie, just helping them accept responsibility. So accepting responsibility and learning to say I was wrong. And then incidentally, the prodigal son also illustrates that one. I have sinned against heaven and against you. Incidentally, when we sin against someone, we also sin against God. So we need to confess to God and also to the person. Accepting responsibility. And then the third one is offering to make restitution. What can I do to make this right? I know I've hurt you. I know I can't undo it. But what can I do to make this right? And this is exactly what Zacchaeus did after he encountered Jesus. The people from whom I've stolen, I'm going to give back 4 times what I took. He's trying to make it right. And again, there are people for whom this is what they perceive to be a sincere apology. And if you don't offer to make things right, then in their mind, you're not sincere.
It was just words.
Yeah. I had a counselor friend of mine who read the manuscript before we published it. And he said, Gary, man, this is helping me. He said, my wife and I decided to read the manuscript together. And he said, I knew that what I considered to be a sincere apology was I'm sorry. If my wife tells me she's sorry for what she did, man, I can forgive her. So he said, what have I done all of our married life? I've told my wife I'm sorry for what I did. Always seemed like she couldn't let it go. And when we got to this one, making restitution, she said, this is what I've been waiting for all of our lives. You have never, ever offered to make things right. He said, Gary, never thought about it, you know, but now I do. And she always has an idea on what I can do to make it right. So for some people, this is what they're waiting to hear. And then a fourth one is expressing the desire to change. I don't like this about me. I don't want to keep doing this. I know I did the same thing last week. I don't want to keep doing
this habit or this pattern that I'm doing.
That's right. You're expressing the desire to change the pattern. And for some people, if you don't offer to make change because they know you've done it before, then you're not sincere. So offering finding a way to make it different. I was talking to a lady in the counseling office, and she said, Gary, I can give you a perfect example of that. She said, several years ago, maybe 8 years ago, my husband lost his temper with our baby. Baby was about 18 months old. Baby was crying, and he had done everything he knew to do to make the baby stop crying, and he got angry and lost his temper. He picked up our baby and started shaking our baby.
Wow.
And when he did, she said, I grabbed the baby and said, don't do that to our baby. And I went to the bedroom just weeping. She said 10 minutes later, he knocked on the door and asked me if he could come in. He walked in and he said, honey, I can't believe I did that. You know I love our baby. I can't believe. He said he started crying. I can't believe I did that. And he said, honey, can we talk? I don't ever want to do that again. Can you help me? Can we get a plan so I won't do that again? She said, Gary, I just sensed he was so sincere. I forgave him, even though what he did was a horrible thing in my mind. And she said, we sat there and talked. We came up with a very simple plan that if he ever felt himself about to lose one of our children, he would simply turn to me and say, honey, I'm hot. I've got to take a walk. And I knew what it meant, and he would take a walk.
Yep.
She said, Gary, that was probably 8 years ago. He's never lost his temper with one of our children since. She said he's taken several walks. So this, again, is one of the languages of apology, is expressing the desire to change. And then number 5 is actually requesting forgiveness. Now, I have to be honest, this one was not on my radar because I thought if a person is apologizing, whatever they're saying, doesn't the other person know they want to be forgiven? Why would you be apologizing if you don't want to be forgiven? But for some people, they're waiting for you to say, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me.
Yeah.
I value our relationship, and I hope you can forgive me. And if you don't request forgiveness, then in their mind, you're not sincere. So this insight has been very, very helpful in my counseling and also in my workshops and that sort of thing with couples. It's helping them learn what they consider to be an apology. Now, John, we did find this. About 10% of the population almost never apologizes for anything.
10%?
10%. And most of them are men. And many of them learned it from their father, who said, real men don't apologize. Now, you know where their father got that.
Yep.
John Wayne, that great theologian. So they were taught not to apologize. And then others were like me. My father never said that, but I never heard my father apologize.
So it wasn't modeled for you.
That's right. You know, I remember being in the back seat of the car. I was probably 6 or 7. My dad was driving. My mother was beside him. And they got into it. And my dad was saying harsh things to my mother and loudly. And my mother just clammed up. Now, looking back on it as an adult, I'm assuming Mom found out that if she responded, it would get louder and longer. So she just clammed up. And Dad eventually ran out of steam. And we drove in silence. Mm-hmm. I'm in the back seat, not feeling well, because the 2 most important people in my life have just been at it, and my dad just kept on going. I'm not saying my father didn't apologize. He may have apologized to my mother in private, but I never heard him apologize for that or anything. So I came into marriage with no model of an apology. So I had to learn, I got to do something here because I do wrong. So there are those people, probably 10% of the population. And to those people, we have to help them understand that apologizing is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. So we have to learn to apologize. And then if you can help couples in particular discover what the other person considers to be a sincere apology, and then be willing to speak your apology in that language, you make it easier for them to forgive. So that's one approach. But the flip side of that is this. Now that you know there are 5 ways to apologize, then if your spouse or anyone else is apologizing to you in one of these languages, you can give them credit for it. Because you can say in your mind, well, this is what their parent taught them. This is what they learned growing up. This is the way you apologize.
They got 2, 4, and 5 right or something. Yeah.
So you can forgive them even if they're not speaking your language, because now you know there are different ways that people apologize. So this is helpful from both angles. And I just have found it very, very helpful in working with couples.
Gary, one of the things I like about it is because, like in your other books, we always make the assumption that, well, the way I like it is the way they like it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry she fixed my wife, and why doesn't it? And you're really good at explaining, wait a minute, what really helps you feel connected and got closure on something may not be the way they are to, because people are so different. And you really take that into account. And I think as counselors, we need to remember that.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think this can be helpful. Now, apology alone does not restore a relationship. There has to be a response to the apology, and that's forgiveness. And without forgiveness, the barrier is not removed. The barrier remains. Mm-hmm. And forgiveness is always the Christian response. Mm-hmm. We're to forgive others as God forgives us. How does God forgive us? When we confess our sins, God is faithful and just to forgive us. So when someone's apologizing to us, then we must be ready to forgive them. Yep. And forgiveness means that we're willing to lift the penalty, willing to pardon them, willing to remove the barrier, willing to let them back into our lives so that the relationship can go forward. And without forgiveness, the relationship will not go forward. The barrier will sit there. Mm-hmm. So, and I say this to people, don't try to force your spouse or anyone else to forgive you. Forgiveness is a choice. And maybe they've been hurt so deeply, they need a little time to process in their mind. So don't give them a sermon, and say, if you were a Christian, you forgive me. Yeah. No. You give them time to process it. But hopefully in a day or so, or a few hours, they'll come back and say, honey, I forgive you. But I also want to say this, John, because I think this is important. There's some things forgiveness does not do. In a part of the Christian church today, we've almost communicated the idea that sin is not really all that bad, because you can ask God to forgive you and he will, and you can ask the person to forgive you and they will, and everything's fine. Well, there's some things forgiveness doesn't do. For example, forgiveness does not remove the memory of what happened. You hear people say, well, if you haven't forgotten, you haven't forgiven. I don't think that's true.
I don't think it's true either.
Everything that's ever happened to us is in the brain. And sometimes it jumps back into the conscious mind. You remember what they did. And forgiveness does not remove the emotions. Because when the memory comes back, often the emotion comes back. The hurt, the pain, sometimes even the anger comes back. So I say to people, when you have the memory and when you have the pain that comes back, take it to God. If you've already forgiven them, you go to God and say, Lord, you know what I'm remembering. And you know what I'm feeling again, but I thank you that I forgave that. Now help me to do something good today. And don't allow the memory and the emotion to control your behavior. And it may come back many times, but it'll come back fewer times along the way if you process it in that manner. And then I think also, forgiveness doesn't remove all the consequences of sin.
No, it doesn't.
Let's say that I get drunk and get in my car and start driving. Now, the Bible clearly says don't get drunk, okay? So I violated God's principle. So I'm under the influence driving. I have an accident. I can right there at the bottom of the accident or in the car where the accident occurred, I can say to God, Lord, forgive me, and I can pour out my heart to God, and he'll forgive me. But my car is still messed up. My leg is still broken. And the same thing is true in other aspects of the relationship. Not all the consequences are removed. Here's a man who leaves his wife, who goes off somewhere and marries somebody else, and 20 years later becomes a Christian, and now he's trying to get his life straightened out, and he realizes, I need to go back and apologize to my wife and my children. And he can do that, and they can forgive him. But it's not going to bring back the 20 years he lost with his children, So I think we have to be honest with people. We are never better for having sinned. Sin always has scars, but forgiveness can be there, and at least we're living with a scar and not an open wound. So that I think is important. And forgiveness does not automatically restore trust. Those of you that are counseling, you've probably heard people say, as I've heard many wives say, for example, and husbands, Dr. Chapman, I've forgiven him. He had an affair, but I forgave him. But to be honest with you, I don't trust him. Mm. And I say, welcome to the human race. Yeah. Forgiveness does not equal trust. Trust has to be reborn by him being trustworthy. Mm. So I say to the husband in that situation, if he's had an affair and now he's trying to get things reconciled, I say, if you want her to trust you again, you say to her, my cell phone is yours, honey, anytime you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Computer is yours anytime you want to look at it. If I tell you I'm going over to George's house to help him work on his car, you can call over there and see if I'm there. It'll be fine. I'm through with deceit. You take that approach, your wife will come to trust you again. Trust is reborn in time. Forgiveness opens the door to the possibility that trust can be reborn. So I think it's important to understand the limitations of forgiveness, but also the necessity of forgiveness if we're going to have long-term healthy relationships.
Yeah, especially how apologies, forgiveness, and trust all go together. It's a wonderful summary of that. Thanks, Gary. Hey, guys, this is a great book. When apologies, say it again, when sorry isn't enough.
Isn't enough. I'm sorry isn't enough. Yeah.
Guys, get the book. It's really, really good stuff, and you're going to need it because everybody in your counseling practice is going to still, not only just couples, but also individuals that might need to give or receive an apology when you're working on one-to-one. Phenomenal material here. Gary, we're almost out of time here, but you know, one of the things we do at the Institute is take people who are New York Times bestsellers like you, who have a platform that's worldwide, and you used to be a student once. And to remember back in those days, and you know, these folks here, they're all over the world here, and they're going to be getting out in a few months, and they're going to be looking for jobs, and they're going to be practicing. But what kind of a preparatory thing, couple of thoughts you might have about to make sure that they do while they're still in their grad school training to make the rest of their life meaningful?
Well, I would say, first of all, of course, learn everything you can. Don't sleep through classes. Stay awake, stay alert, do the reading, do the assignments. Don't shortcut yourself in the study aspect of all of it. The other thing I would say would be seek to apply what you're learning to yourself, both in understanding yourself, looking at your history and understanding, you know, what has gone into making you who you are, but also applying the concepts you learn in your personal relationships, whether it's with, you know, a roommate, or whether it's with a work associate, or whether it's with your parents or your siblings or a boyfriend, girlfriend. Seek to apply these things and use them in your own relationship. Because if you're going to help others, and you can look back in a time and say, you know, I remember one time I was going through this and da-da-da-da-da, you know, people identify with that. When you share your struggle and how you use something to help you, and you encourage them to use it. So I think those especially are the two things I would say. Make the most of your opportunity to learn and then apply it in your own personal relationships, and realize that you're not perfect, and realize that you don't have all the answers, and you won't ever have all the answers. I remember many times through the years, and not ancient years, but more recent years, sitting there and listening to someone pour out their heart and tell me their story. And I'm thinking inside, man, I don't know where to go with this. And I'm sending up a prayer to God, Lord, give me wisdom to know what to say here. And end up saying something never crossed my mind before. That was exactly what that person needed. So in this whole ministry of helping people, we are not alone. We have the help of God. God's more concerned than we are about the brokenness of the people who sit in our offices. So don't feel like you have to have all the answers. You're going to learn everything you can, but there's going to be times when you're not going to know which way to go. And you can even say to people, I don't exactly have advice to give you on this, but you know, and then you maybe point them in some other direction, or maybe you say, this week I'm going to give some thought to this. I'm going to see what I can find out about this, and next week I hope I have something that'll be helpful to you. So being honest, being open, being authentic with the people that you are counseling or will be counseling, I think is also extremely important. And not acting like, you know, we have all the answers to everything. Because we too are in process. And if we keep that in mind and realize our limitations, but also the help that we have from God and our responsibility to learn everything we can to help people, we will become an instrument in the hand of God to help people who are broken.
Gary Chapman, this is great. Guys, I want you to remember that Gary, I want you to get into Gary's stuff and get into his works and his website and his books, because, listen, he's biblically based. He also uses research, which backs up the Bible, and also he's got a wealth of experience because he observes and he thinks when he's working with people. So he's a reputable guy that you need to get to know better. Dr. Gary Chapman, God bless you. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, John. Good to be with you and good to be with the students.
We'll see you back in the Tar Heel State.
All right. Look forward
All
to
right,
it.
take care.